Welcome, everybody, to the OPT Network. This morning, we're talking about raising good humans, a mindful guide to breaking the cycle of reactive parenting and raising kind, confident kids. Our guest this morning, Hunter Clarke-Fields. Hunter, good morning and welcome.
Thank you for having me, Carlette. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here because so many of us are trying to figure out how to model what you're writing about in terms of our kids. But first of all, tell us what a MSAE is.
Sure, yeah. I got a Master of Science in Art Education in my master's degree, and I was very interested in teaching, and I'm a painter, and then I discovered it was not for me. It was not for me. I really like the teaching, but I do not like being a teacher.
Wow.
Teacher.
When did you figure it out?
After the second year.
Mm-hmm.
I said, this is not my thing. So I went and discovered other things to do. Yeah, I love teaching. I'm definitely like a teacher at heart. Like I love coaching and teaching, and I teach in my mindful parenting membership now. And I love that teaching, but I only want to teach from people who really want to learn from me. I don't want to teach.
You don't want to have to struggle to make people learn.
No.
And so when did you decide that you would totally switch gears in the principle of how you taught to what you want to teach and who your students would be?
Well, it was definitely an evolution. When I stopped teaching, that was the year that I started finally doing my own meditation practice. I stopped teaching in like the end of May, beginning of June, and then I did a month-long yoga teacher training that year. And then that allowed me to finally do my own meditation practice at home. And then that was also the year maybe it was the next year I went back for half a year, but then I got pregnant pretty soon after that. So I said, okay, all right, well, we're just going to stop. I'm going to stay home with these kids. I'm going to focus on this. I'll do some of my painting as well. And I'll pursue some of the art as well. But I really want to focus on being the best mom I can be for these kids. And so it was kind of an evolution over that time. And then as I got into, that desire to like reach out, to teach, to share had always been there. So I started blogging and writing about the difficulties of parenting when my first daughter was little, and about how I was taking care of myself to stay grounded through that. And so it evolved from there.
Mm-hmm. And so was it therapeutic for you when you started writing about how hard parenting is?
Yes, it really was, because I shared very honestly, like about my anger and that came up for me, this like the yelling and how, and it's a really shameful thing to share, right? Like a lot of things come up for me. And as I shared it, I got so much feedback of like, thank you so much for sharing this, because I'm dealing with this too. And, we get this image of motherhood from our culture that it's all like pink, fluffy rainbows. And it's really hard. Like those first years of parenting, like it's physically challenging. It's psychologically challenging. It changes every single relationship you have with your body, with your partner, with your own parents. And then you're back in this parent-child relationship and stuff is coming up. And so, it really was helpful to just be really honest about that. And it was just a little scary, but it really helped me to say, this is where I am. This is what I've struggled with. And now I'm taking this challenge, which is like, honestly, my temper really is the challenge, taking this challenge and turning it into my teacher. And what can I learn from this challenge? And what do I need to learn from this challenge?
Tell us about throwing your heart over the bar and really being honest about where you were in parenting. Because if we're honest, we are all at some point going to holler at our children. Because I always said, I don't want to be a hollering mother. When I first got pregnant and had kids, I didn't want to be that mother. But sometimes you can find yourself in those positions, when did you just say, you know what, I'm gonna just put it out there?
I mean, I was writing about how I was taking care of myself, but at first I wasn't writing about the reason why this was so important. And for me, that really was the reason why, was that I found myself yelling at my daughter, and then I saw her scared of me. Like I could see it all over her face. She was scared. And then felt terrible, and I'm like crying in a puddle on the floor, telling myself I'm a terrible mom, but none of that's working, right? So I had to start to say, okay, what will work? And so I started to be a little more compassionate with myself. Like, this is hard. And when I shared it with others and got others' feedback of like, yes, I'm going through this too, it was like, yes, like we're not alone. And we tell ourselves we're alone, but we're really not. So it really, for me to share that and to help other people know they're not alone was incredibly powerful for me to be able to do that. And that was really a big motivator for me, to just see that it helped other people so much.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about building the community that you've built, just through your honesty and sharing your own life and your journey.
Sure. I mean, the whole Mindful Mama tribe, they're an amazing group of incredible, smart women, some men, God bless them. And you know, there's a real, like, I think because of that openness and honesty that started in the very beginning with this whole journey, there's a real openness and honestness in the community, you know. So I get together, I come in 3 times a month, and I coach in the community, in the mindful parenting community. And there's a real sharing and a real understanding of like, yes, like none of us were taught how to take care of difficult feelings. We need to like have tools to do that. Here are the tools. Let's practice them together. And then there's all this like, yes, me too, me too, me too, that comes up all the time as we do that. And it's just so healing to like come into a like, even if you're on Zoom, you know, even if you're all around the world, like to come into a circle of people who are saying, this is really important, this really matters. And to grow here, we have to kind of have the bravery of some vulnerability. And that's incredibly powerful, because that's a big part of the whole thing, is to say, part of the communication skills that I teach and the inner work skills that I teach, they both require us to be really honest with ourselves and honest in our communication outward. And so I think that honesty and this openness really pervades it, which is, to me, awesome, because like that authenticity is like an incredible core value for me.
And so after you put it out there and about how you were taking care of yourself, how do you then find the tools to do something different? Because yelling sort of is like you're really wanting control of the situation, and you're wanting to get your child to do what it is that you need them to do. But at some point you realize, okay, maybe that's not the best technique.
Yeah, it really is very incredibly counterproductive, because our kids, when we yell, their whole nervous system goes into fight, flight, or freeze, and they can't learn. Like, they can't learn anything in that moment. For me, it was like, well, so I'm one of those people, I'm like used to being I'm good at being good at things, right? Like, I'm like that good student. I can go get the good grades, and I can do school, and I can go do this, and I go through all the different things. I'm good at being good at things. And then I got to this place with parenting where I was really not good at it. And I was terrible, right? So I thought, okay, I'm failing at this. Like, what do I need to do? What do I need to learn? And I really kind of put myself through this like intensive course of study. And I really dove back into mindfulness, which is something I had been exploring. I dove back into it deeper to understand the neurobiology of it, how it affects us, to understand like how much practice do we need to do to lower our reactivity. I dove into those communication skills that people were teaching, and I went and got trainings, invested in trainings and all these different modalities and learnings, and kind of distilled all of like the best of what I could find into really raising good humans. But basically, I was really frustrated, and that's one of the reasons why Raising Good Humans came about, was because I was really frustrated because kind of in the parenting world, it would all just be like, kind of like, just respond this way, and everything's going to be fine. It was always like step one, pause, and then respond this way. And it so frustrated me because I was like not doing great with step one, pause, and not a lot of people do. And there's like a lot of learning that goes before that step one. And that was all what I found in the mindfulness world, like that self-compassion, the skills and tools, the inner work, understanding our triggers, right? And so I was like, these two worlds need to talk to each other. Like they need to come together. And really one without the other wasn't enough. I felt like they needed to come together, that inner work. And then, what do you say after that? If you have been raised with unskillful means, which most of us honestly have, then that's just generally what's going to come out of our mouth. So then what do we say after that? And then that's kind of like learning a new language. So we need to be able to lower our reactivity and steady our hearts. And then we can take in all this like new language, and then it can come out more authentically, right? Then it's not just like a tip or trick that you forget in 3 weeks and that doesn't really last. Then it's something that comes out of you authentically from the inside out.
Tell me about learning to change your mind, because we're all programmed. We all come from where we come from, and intrinsically we do what we saw our parents do for the most part. Now, some of us say, well, you know what, there's certain things that I'm just not going to do. But all you know is what you know. So now in finding compassion for oneself, you have to really start to reprogram your mind so that you can come into this new way of learning and being able to communicate and teach your children so that you can raise good humans. So how does that process happen?
That's a great question, because it's true. Like we think we can just decide to respond a different way, or we think we can
and
just
it doesn't
decide.
work like that.
I know.
You know, if you've been doing a thing for 30 or 40 years, it's not going to just change because you say, okay, I need to be more mindful. It doesn't just change like that.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest mistakes, that we think we can just choose. And it really does take practice. And I think of it like in our brains like this. A long time ago, I went to a lecture by a neuroscientist, which was so fascinating. He talked about the brain and these neural networks that are in the brain, and how literally the things that you have done a million times literally have a deeper groove in the brain, because that connection is so well worn. Kind of like we have a highway, right? Like it's like super easy to go down that highway. And literally the new things that you have to learn are like charting a new path in the brain. So it's harder. It's not quite so easy for us to make those connections. And I kind of think of it like, like the one is like that highway, and the other is like we're bushwhacking a path through the woods, right? A whole new path that's overgrown, and it's got to be it's got to be cultivated into a path, because it doesn't exist. Exactly. Yes. And so it really is true that our brains can grow and learn and change at any age. And what you practice grows stronger. So things like compassion, loving kindness. If you think, oh, I'm not necessarily so intrinsically like that, I'm not like that. But the truth is you can grow it and learn it. It's kind of like the what you water, the seeds that you water are the most. You have to kind of be a good gardener, and you have to water those good seeds again and again and again. And then you have to also interrupt the harmful patterns, right? You may have harmful patterns of thinking. You may tell yourself, like I did, like that you're a terrible mother or a terrible parent. And that thought that arises, it's just a thought, but we identify with that thought. We think it's like the truth. And it's just it's just words that are arising in your brain. And so as we start, we have to start to interrupt those strong pathways. And we can do that in a lot of ways. One of the ways I think is really simple to do that is to put the phrase, if you're having like a harmful thought, if you're having something that repeats, a negative inner critic, stuff like that. So you put the phrase, I'm having the thought that, in front of that thought. So instead of, I'm a terrible parent, I'm having the thought that I'm a terrible parent. And you can hear the difference in that, right? Like,
because
you can feel
all it
the difference
is a thought.
Because all it is a thought. And that just takes practice again and again and again. So what we do in the membership is we say, like, okay, like, you, for the next 2 weeks, you get your sticky notes out. You put that sticky note out of what you're practicing all over the house, in your car, and you practice this pattern again and again and again and again for the next 2 weeks, till it starts to become something that's a little more familiar to you, right? And then you may have to change out your Post-it notes after a little while, because you'll stop seeing them. But it is literally just something that we can practice, right? Or we can get an accountability buddy, and we can practice that really with them as well to help get accountability. But these are like bit by bit changes that really make a huge, valuable change overall. It affects every single area of your life, not just your parenting, but the parenting can be the catalyst for these incredibly powerful changes that allow you to actually live with more ease and peace in general in every relationship you have.
And so once you start the journey, when does it start to take hold for you personally? When is that new pathway? When can you say, okay, I'm seeing a difference?
It's interesting because, like, I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a visual of like a learning ladder or stairway, right? And at first we are unconsciously unskilled. So that means, like, we don't know what we don't know, and we don't have any skills. And so a lot of us start there. And then we start to watch things like your show, Carlette. We start to learn some things, and we start to become consciously unskilled. We're moving up the ladder, the stairway. And that means we know now what we don't know. And then we're like, oh gosh, I feel terrible. What's going on?
But now we're consciously aware that we don't know and that we might need to make a change.
Exactly. And that's like a great win, honestly, to be at that place, because you can't change what you're not aware of. Right? And so I think that sometimes we get down on ourselves and hard on ourselves when we get to that place. But to honestly say, okay, well, awareness is the key to making any kind of change. So, and now I have this awareness. Okay, so this is a win. And then as you go up, with time and practice and learning, you go up to this place of being consciously skilled, right? So then you learn some skills and you're really conscious of them. And we stay there for a long time with many of our skills, right? Where we're practicing to be present. We're practicing to bring our attention back to the present moment. I mean, I've been practicing that one for 15 years now. So it's a skill that you practice again and again, or you practice to express yourself more skillfully with your kids, and rather than bark orders at them, you practice to speak to them as you would speak to any person that you want to be polite with, right? And so that becomes a skill. And so with time and practice, some of those skills start to become unconscious, right? They start to become something that you develop in your life, and then you're at this unconsciously skilled area, which is sort of the top. But it takes time and practice, and it takes intention, right, and guidance, and a structure and a path to be able to do that, right? It's like helps to just say, like, okay, first I'm calming my reactivity with these habits that study the heart and mind. Then I'm understanding my triggers. Okay, I'm doing that path. Then I'm learning to listen. I'm learning to express myself more effectively. And then I'm learning to resolve conflicts, without
yelling.
Without yelling. Without anger, and even we can learn to resolve conflicts, without necessarily using a bunch of power over our kids, right? Like, there are a bunch of conflicts that we can resolve in parenting where we can have input with our kids, and we can say, well, what are you needing? And what am I needing? And how can we get everybody's needs met? Right. And it's such a really refreshing way to resolve conflicts, because then it's like, you don't have to have all the answers as a parent. Your child can provide a bunch of the answers. It's really, really powerful.
When you say it, Hunter, you make it sound so simple.
Oh, no.
But we know it's not easy. So walk us through how that balance, because you write about it in the book, about asking your child what they need and how you can basically help them at that moment. But a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old who is inconsolable, who wants what they want, who is not doing what they need to do in pre-K, help us to navigate that, because I'm all about creating these new neural pathways, because I realize, not just from reading the book, but I realize that's how change has to happen. We've got to create it, and it's not easy. So tell us what that looks like, navigating that with a 4 or 5-year-old.
I love it's so great to bring it into a real example. With a 4 or 5-year-old who maybe wants something, right, that they can't have, and they're in a situation like preschool. So what the first thing that needs to be addressed in that moment is the feelings that are, and that feeling for that child of being seen and heard. And this piece about acknowledgement is like a huge thing that we miss as parents a lot, because we have an agenda of where we're going.
Right.
And so instead, if we can like do that piece about pausing and like crouch down real low, join with our child, think about joining with them and really trying to see and hear them, right? So, you're really upset right now. You want this so badly, right? Oh, okay, I hear that, right? That would be amazing. I wish I could wave a magic wand and make it the perfect time to do this thing. Yeah, I wish I could. And so as we start to like acknowledge what that child is going through, so often we don't do that. Well, you can't have that. So
Right.
Next, right? But if we say, this is hard for you right now. I see that this is like hard for you right now.
So now we're going to empathize with them, even though it makes no sense to us, or it's not what we want. It's not where we need them to be, but we're going to empathize, and we're going to say, I understand that you want that.
Yeah. And empathize not only just verbally, but like, oh, I get it, babe. Like this is hard for you. And that piece of like just being fully seen and heard, is really healing. It's really healing for all of us, whether you're like 3 or whether you're 30. And it really makes a difference. And kids' worries are their worries. And we may not take them seriously or understand them, but they're serious to them. And when we give that like loving kindness, when we give that respect and compassion to them, they're really much more likely to give it back to us. And when they feel seen and heard, then they're much more likely to listen to us, right? So it's really, we want to think about, it's our relationship with our kids is a relationship, just like our relationship maybe with a spouse is a relationship that we work on, and we try to understand them and see them and hear them and work on the same back. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And I think for me, as I'm sitting here listening to that analogy, I think that as a parent, what I've wanted to do is do what I say do. I want to give the instruction. I want it to go like I need it to go, because I need it to go this way. And I haven't really created that sort of relationship where the child is part of the decisions, because that's not how I was raised. A child stayed in a child's place, but as we grow and change in parenting, we have to learn different skills, and that's a skill that I didn't have and that I don't have.
And it's interesting because it's actually not just like this sort of like fluffy, nice new thing. It's actually just more effective too, because then when you're making a request of your child down the line, you've like put in those deposits in that relationship bank account. So you're much likely to get them back, right? Because they're not used to just resisting you all the time. Because if we always push down the solution, or if we're, then they start to resent and resist us by habit. So then when we can do that, then we get, they listen to us more easily afterwards.
So let's talk about discipline and how discipline and mindfulness work together.
Well, I mean, so I think discipline and mindfulness, we want to think about this idea of discipline. It's really helpful to think about what the root of the word discipline means. Like it comes from the same root as the word disciple, right? Somebody to follow, a teacher, right? So when we are to discipline, ultimately really should mean to teach our children, right? To teach them how to get along in this world. And so they're gonna mess up because they're human, and they're by definition immature because they're kids, right? So they're gonna mess up. And if we understand, it's really helpful to understand that actually they don't learn a whole lot when we use punishments, because then they start to resent you, the person who gave the punishment. We kind of think of in this behaviorist way, but kids aren't like that. So they start to resent you, the giver of the punishment, and they may submit or they may resist, but either way, they're kind of not resisting you, right? So instead, if we can think about that word discipline, about, okay, what does my child need to learn at this moment? My 4-year-old son is hitting his 3-year-old sister, right? So, whoa, what's going on? Okay, you must be really angry, right? This is going on. So we start to come in and we start to say, what does my child need to learn in this moment? And if we can use that piece, and that's where mindfulness comes in, right? Like this is that awareness of like, can I lower my reactivity? That's what mindfulness really, really helps with, is to our steady practice helps us to lower our reactivity. So our stress response, our threat response, right, isn't all triggered. And then we can think logically, and then we can say, okay, well, what is my child needing at this moment? And if you think about a child who's hitting, what is that child needing? They're needing some skills to get their needs met, to be able to communicate with their sibling. And that's what we need to give them in that moment, right? We don't need to tell them that they're a bad human being because they did this thing.
And so they're hitting. And so what skill do we want to put in place? Because they're hitting because that's the way that they're trying to meet their need or trying to get the control that they want. So what do we put in the place of that?
Well, it depends on every situation. So if they're hitting, you're wanting your toy back from your sister. This is how we ask for a toy back. And when you can't get a toy back, and she's not giving it to you, that's so frustrating. You come get me, and I'll come help you. So we want to think about, well, what do we want to teach our child to do in those moments? Right. What do we want them to say? So depending on whatever that specific moment is, what do we want to teach them that they can take into the future, and that's what's beautiful about that, is then they're learning something new for next time. We might need to teach it a number of times, right? No one's like, got it. Thanks, Mom. Got it. Okay. We're good. But we teach it a number of times, but then it's beautiful for us. We don't have to like stand there and try to like put our child back on the stairs for their naughty seat again and again and again. We're not telling them they're naughty. They're not just resisting us. Like we're keeping that connection in place, but we're just teaching them about how to get along in the world.
So let's talk about the mindfulness piece, because a lot of people now are talking about mindfulness, but let's talk about what mindfulness means for a parent and how to create that.
So mindfulness really is like about the intention to pay attention in the present moment.
The intention to pay attention.
Yes. With and this is really important, with an attitude of kindness and curiosity, right? So most of the time we are I'm like, my brain is like planning all the time. Most of the time we're planning something that's coming next. We're maybe planning our response in a conversation. We're always like a million miles ahead, like doing a bunch of things. And often we're remembering, we're kind of thinking like 90,000 thoughts a day that we're thinking that we probably thought yesterday. And so the point of mindfulness though, is not to eliminate your thoughts. No one can do that. So if you thought you can't do it because you can't do that, you're welcome to the club. That's not what it's about. But it is about being able to bring our attention to, it's like building a muscle, just like we do at the gym, right? Of bringing our attention back to the present moment and being able to dwell there for a moment or two, right? To be able to dwell there and kind of really have some clarity of being able to see clearly in that moment, and whether that's about ourselves, whether that's about our children. And so this isn't a state of mind that just happens. It is a state of mind that happens naturally at random times, but it is really a state of mind that we cultivate. It's a practice that we cultivate, because it's kind of like, I kind of think of it as like a brain hack that they figured out a few thousand years ago, that there's this, if we sit still and we practice to be non-reactive to all the different things that come up, and we keep building this muscle of coming back to the present moment with our attention, then we get more peace, more equanimity. There's all this research that shows it helps us to sleep better. It lowers depression, lowers anxiety, all these different things, right? And so for parents, what's really, really important for us is that it lowers our reactivity. And so it actually, like in the MRI studies, show that there's the alarm bells of the brain. The amygdala are the seat of our stress response, our fight, flight, or freeze response. And those, an 8-week course of mindfulness can actually shrink the amygdala, make them less dense. And it can actually grow more dense, the prefrontal cortex area, which is where all our higher order thinking is, like our logic, our verbal ability, our empathy, all of those things. And so it literally changes the brain so that you have more clarity, more focus, and it's a state that you can drop into more easily. But it is something that you have to practice. You can't just like you can't go to the gym like once a week and like do 5 minutes of triceps and you're good. You know, it's something that you practice daily over time, and it doesn't have to be a lot, but sitting down for, you know, starting off with 3 minutes or 5 minutes, maybe working yourself up to 10 minutes of just sitting quietly and maybe doing a guided meditation can transform so many parts of your life. For me, it made it so that I used to have these like big dips in emotion, like real roller coaster. And I don't have those like big dips that I used to have anymore. I don't have those like those kind of panic attacks that I used to have when I was a high school teacher. That whole thing, that just doesn't even happen for me anymore, which is like this huge freedom for me. And it really just helps us to access that calm when we need it, right? You know, we're not going to get it unless we practice it.
Absolutely. And so before we've got to go, Hunter, I want you to, you know, you've been doing this, you've been coaching and really sharing this message with a lot of people. What do you want people who are parenting to take away from raising good humans and understanding that we can all get better and it's a process?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I would like parents to take away that you know, we all have these kind of patterns that we can see from generations, and you can change those generational patterns, but it does take intentional practice. You know, it does take effort and intentional practice. Sometimes we go into parenting and we're like, oh, we're just fly by the seat of our pants. But I really think that it makes a lot more sense that this is the most important thing in our life, that we're going to actually learn some new skills and new practices so that we can transform those generational patterns. And my message is that it is possible. And it also can transform like all the other parts of your life as well, which is
absolutely cool. Tell people how they can get your book, and most importantly, how they can connect with your podcast.
Sure. You can find Raising Good Humans anywhere books are sold. Get it on Amazon, your local bookstore. And I also, you can listen to the Mindful Mama podcast. We have over 1 million downloads now. We've been going for a number of years, and you can listen to that anywhere you find podcasts, and find all of that at mindfulmamamentor.com.
There you go. Hunter, thank you so much. You have been so insightful. And you know what? This whole conversation, I think, has made everybody feel a little bit more at ease. And maybe we can be a little bit kinder to ourselves and figure out what we need to know so that we can overcome it and start the work.
Thank you so much, Carlette. This has been a joy to talk to you. I really love and really have enjoyed talking to you today.
Right back at you. The book is called Raising Good Humans, A Mindful Guide to Breaking the Cycle of Reactive Parenting and Raising Kind, Confident Kids. Stay on point, everybody. We're back right after this.